Assalamu alaikum. In the last video about the angel Gabriel, we discussed how the Talmud says that the angel Gabriel has the authority to rebuke God, and essentially we spoke about how blasphemous that is. There's another side to the Talmud's opinion on the angel Gabriel, and that side is actually intentionally very negative. The last thing we saw with the rebuking God, we talked about how negative that is, and if the angel Gabriel ever found out about that, he would not be pleased, and it is an insult to both God and Gabriel. He would, that's sort of making an enemy out of Gabriel. But here we see them intentionally portraying Gabriel in a very bad manner. And the way they do it is by absolutely butchering the context of the Bible, taking verses out of context to come up with this sort of convoluted story that doesn't even make any sense when we go back to the verses and see what they're actually saying. So they take these verses and they come up with this story where the angel Gabriel disobeys God and is punished by fire and thrown out of the company of the inner angels. They come up with this whole story, and it makes the angel Gabriel look really bad, and it's done out of sort of butchering the biblical context. So let's read Yoma 77a is the reference. The Holy One, blessed be He, said to Michael, the ministering angel of the Jewish people, Michael, your nation has sinned. He replied, Master of the universe, may it be enough for the good people among them to save them from destruction. He said to him, I will burn them and the good among them, because the good do not rebuke the wicked. So immediately we see that Michael is portrayed in a good manner. But then Gabriel is introduced. Immediately God spoke to Gabriel. He spoke to the man clothed in linen and said, Go in between the wheelwork and between the cherub, or beneath the cherub, and fill your hands with the coals of fire from between the cherubs and scatter them over the city. And he came before my eyes. This is Ezekiel 10:2. So here they're interpreting the man clothed in linen to be a reference to the angel Gabriel. Essentially what happens is he's commanded to take coal from between the cherubs. Okay, fill your hands with coals of fire from between the cherubs and scatter them over the city. Immediately, and the cherub stretched out his hand from between the cherubs into the fire that was between the cherubs, and took and put it into the hands of him that was clothed in linen, who took it and went out. Ezekiel 10:7. So essentially what happens is the cherub itself takes out the coals from between the cherubs and hands it over to the angel Gabriel. So the way they read this in the Talmud is Gabriel was supposed to take them directly from between the cherubs, but what happened was the cherub took it itself and handed it over to Gabriel. And here, so the end is Ezekiel 10:7. So now they say, if it were not for the fact that the embers cooled as they were passed from the hand of the cherub to the hand of Gabriel, instead of Gabriel taking the embers directly himself as he had been told, not a remnant or a refugee of the enemies of the Jewish people, a euphemism for the Jewish people themselves, would have survived. The cooling of the embers limited the punishment. So you see here that they mentioned that he took them from the hands of the cherub instead of taking it directly as he had been told. So he didn't do exactly what he was commanded to do. Then they say, and it is written, and behold, the Gemara continues, and it is written, and behold, the man clothed in linen with the slate by his side reported the matter, saying, I've done as you have commanded me. Ezekiel 9:11. So basically, angel Gabriel comes back and he says, I've done what I was commanded to do. Rabbi Yohanan said, at that moment, they, meaning the angels, cast out Gabriel from behind the curtain where the inner angels reside, and they struck him with 60 blows of fire. They said to him, if you did not do it, you did not do it. If you did it, why did you not do it according to what you were told, but deviated from what you were instructed to do? Moreover, after you already did it, do you not have knowledge of the principle one should not deliver a report about destruction? If one is sent on a mission of destruction, he should not deliver a detailed report of its success, but should only hint at it. So the point here they're saying is, you didn't do exactly what you were commanded to do, so why did you deviate? Also, why did you come back and announce to everyone that I have done as you commanded me to do after you did this whole Cole's business? The proper etiquette is when you do something which is about, sort of punishment and negative like that, you don't come back and announce that you've done it. And as a result, he's thrown out of where the inner angels reside, and he is punished with 60 blows of fire. So he disobeys God, he's thrown out from where the inner angels reside, and he's punished with 60 lashes of fire. Very, very negative. Why? Because he doesn't do exactly what he's commanded to do, and then he comes back and he acts like he did what he was commanded. So he's sort of lying here. Maybe, someone could say it's unintentional, but the fact that he's punished makes it seem that he did something wrong, right? He's punished for the fact that he says, I've done as you have commanded me. The problem with the story is it takes Ezekiel out of context. So if you go to Ezekiel 10, verse 2 and 7, so you have that part about the cooling, coals and taking them from among the cherubs. So in Ezekiel 2, you have the line where the Lord said to the man clothed in linen, go in among the wheels beneath the cherubim, fill your hands with burning coal from among the cherub and scatter them over the city. And as I watched, he went in. So Ezekiel 2, you have the command to get the coals from between the cherubs to Gabriel. And then Ezekiel 7, that thing does happen. So then when one of the cherubs reached out his hand, the fire that was among them, he took some of it out and put it into the hands of the man in linen who took it and went out. So the cherub does take out the coal and hand it over to the man clothed in linen, who is the angel Gabriel here, according to them. So yeah, you do have that part. But the story falls apart because at the part here, remember, so angel Gabriel comes back and he says, I've done as you have commanded me. That actually happens all the way back in Ezekiel 9. So Ezekiel 9, you see the red at the bottom, then the man in linen with the writing kit at his side brought back word saying, I've done as you commanded. So it's not even related to the whole taking coals from the cherub. So the order of events is completely reversed from Ezekiel, which tells us it's a made-up story because it's taking the Bible out of context, and so it ends up being a made-up story which portrays the angel Gabriel in a very negative way and sort of slandering him, right? So even this part, I've done as you commanded, that's not in response to Ezekiel 10, the coal command. It's actually in response to Ezekiel 4. So Ezekiel 9 verse 4. Then the Lord called to the man clothed in linen who had the writing kit at his side and said to him, go throughout the city of Jerusalem and put a mark on the foreheads of those who grieve and lament over all the detestable things that are done in it. So when Gabriel does this, then he says, I have done as you commanded. Then God gives him another command to go and take the coals from between the cherub. So you see how the Talmud completely butchers the context. So if you didn't understand, let me just explain. So on the left, you have the Talmud version, and then at the right, we go back to the Bible and check what's actually going on. So in the Talmud, number 1, God commands Gabriel to get the coals. Okay. Number 2, the next thing that happens is Gabriel gets the coals, but he doesn't do exactly what he's told. He doesn't do it perfectly, but he does get the coals, right? So first, God commands Gabriel to get the coals, then Gabriel gets the coals. Then Gabriel comes back and he says he's finished his mission. This is what the Talmud portrays. But actually, when we go back to the Bible, the order is the following. Number 1, God commands Gabriel to mark the foreheads of the people. Number 2, Gabriel does it and he says he's finished his mission. So you see what was number 3 in the Talmud is actually number 2 in the Bible. And what is number 1 and number 2 is actually number 3 and number 4 in the Bible. So then, after Gabriel says he's finished his mission, then God commands Gabriel to get the coals, and then Gabriel gets the coals. So you see this whole business about him finishing his mission, that happens number 2, right? That happens before the whole command to even get the coals. So what the Talmud did is it totally took it out of context. Then it acted like the angel Gabriel essentially lied and deserved punishment for this and was kicked out of where the inner angels reside and was hit with blows of fire, and he disobeyed God because he didn't do exactly what he was commanded. Then he acted like he did it when he didn't, and so because of this he was punished. But when we go back to Ezekiel, we find actually that didn't happen at all. The whole part where he says he's finished the mission comes before he's even commanded to get the coals. And actually the fact that he said, I have done as you commanded, and God gave him another further task about the coals actually shows so the fact that God gave him a further task instead of showing displeasure shows that that the angel Gabriel didn't disobey in the first place. What he did was acceptable in the sight of God. So the fact that after the angel Gabriel marks the foreheads of the people and then he says, I've done as you commanded, immediately, because Ezekiel 9 ends at verse 11, is immediately after that, in verse 2, God just gives him another command. So God doesn't say anything like, why did you not do exactly as I commanded? Why are you disobeying? Nothing like that. He just gives him another command. And even in Ezekiel 10, after this whole cherub thing, there's nothing saying that you didn't do as I commanded. Whereas in the Talmud, as soon as he comes and he says, I've done as you commanded, immediately he's cast out and punished by fire and reprimanded. But in the Bible, there's nothing like them saying that you didn't do what I commanded you. And actually, when he does say, I've done as you commanded, immediately he's just given another task, which makes it seem like God is actually pleased with what he does because he doesn't reprimand him. There's no mention of punishment anywhere. So then it continues. So essentially, here, all that happens is that Gabriel is another angel, and he replaces angel. So that they then brought Dubiel, the ministering angel of the Persians, and put him in place of Gabriel, and he served for 21 days. As it's written, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia stood opposed to me for 21 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there beside the kings of Persia. Corresponding to those 21 days, they gave him the ministering angel of Persia, 21 kings who ruled at the seaport of Mashig. Then the ministering angel of the Persians said, write for me that the Jews must pay taxes to the Persians. They wrote it for him, and he said, write for me the sages must pay taxes. They wrote this for him. When they wanted to sign the documents, Gabriel stood from behind the curtain and said, it is vain for you who rise early, who sit up late to eat the bread of sorrow, for he gives his beloved sleep. Psalm 127:2. What does "for he gives beloved sleep" mean? Rav Yitzhak says, these are the wise of Torah scholars who disturb their sleep in this world by staying up waiting for their husbands, who rise early and return late from learning Torah, and they thereby merit the world to come. Gabriel said, is this the reward they deserve, to pay more taxes? And they did not listen to Gabriel. So at the end also you have them not listening to Gabriel. But here also we see another evidence that this whole story is made up, because Psalm 127:2 is here pretended to be a quote from Gabriel. Gabriel stood from between the curtain and said, it is vain for you who rise early and sit up late to eat the bread of sorrow, for he gives his beloved sleeps, right? So he is apparently the one speaking in Psalm 127:2. But if you actually go to Psalm 127:2, it's not about Gabriel at all. Unless the Lord builds the house and the builders labor in vain, unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves. Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him, like arrows in the hand, etc., etc. Point here is, nowhere do you have the mention of the angel Gabriel saying anything. Actually, this is written by Solomon, or it's written by David. So, of Solomon, so you see at the top there's a disagreement if this means that Solomon wrote it or if David wrote it for Solomon. So Rashi, you see here, he says that this song David recited about his son. So the point is, either David wrote it or Solomon wrote it. You know who didn't write it? The angel Gabriel. And you know what's not mentioned here? That these are the words of the angel Gabriel. So Psalm 127:2 is completely taken out of context as well. Just like Ezekiel 9 and 10, the order of events was switched around. In Psalm 127:2, they're pretending like the angel Gabriel is talking when it's actually David or Solomon. So they're butchering this context as well to come up with this story, which is very negative towards the angel Gabriel. So then he, meaning Gabriel, said before him, Master of the universe, if all the wise men of other nations were placed on one side of the scale, and Daniel, the beloved man, were on the other side, would he not outweigh them? The Holy One, blessed be he, said, who is the one who teaches the virtue of my children? They said to him, Master of the universe, it is Gabriel. He said to them, let him come from behind the partition, as it is stated, and I have come due to your words, meaning that Gabriel was permitted to enter from behind the partition because he mentioned Daniel's name. God then said to the other angels, let him ascend. They brought him up. So then eventually Gabriel is essentially here led back into the company of angels. Why? Because he says the name of Daniel. And so because he said the name Daniel, God allows him to come back. Notice here that when Gabriel is allowed back, it's not because of anything that he did. You know, he didn't do such a great deed that God decided, okay, let's let him back in. Let him back in. He didn't, somehow rectify all his misdeeds or anything. You know, it's not like he did anything great. Rather, the only reason he's let back in is because of the merit of Daniel. So just because he said the name Daniel, he's allowed back in. So even that is attributed to the greatness of Prophet Daniel, not to the angel Gabriel doing anything good. But this is actually another evidence that the story is made up. Why? Because if you go to Daniel 10:12, it's not about this at all. So let's go to Daniel 10:12. So you see here, Daniel 10:12, then he, meaning the angel Gabriel, continued, do not be afraid, Daniel, since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I've come in response to them. So it's not about words that the angel Gabriel spoke and he said the name of Daniel. No, that's not it at all. Rather, the angel Gabriel is here coming in response to the words of the prophet Daniel. He's coming in response to the words of the prophet Daniel, but the way they portray it in the Talmud is that it is the words of Gabriel, and the fact that he mentioned the name Daniel, this is why God allowed him to come up, which is not at all what's happening in Daniel 10. Actually, Daniel 10:12 is a reference to verse 2. At that time, I, Daniel, mourned for 3 weeks. I ate no choice food, no meat or wine touched my lips, and I used no lotion at all until the 3 weeks were over, because he's trying to sort of implied here that he's sort of trying to understand the vision and this and that. So when he's mourning for 3 weeks, it's implied that he sort of be praying. It seems that he'd be sort of praying to God and this and that. And so in verse 12, when it says, "Do not be afraid, Daniel, since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them." This actually seems to be in response to the fact that Daniel was mourning for 3 weeks and probably praying to God, and so the angel Gabriel is coming in response to that prayer. You know what it's not about? It's not about Gabriel saying the name Daniel, and then God being like, wow, he said Daniel, let him come back. That's not at all what it's saying. So it's also butchering the context of Daniel 10, which again shows us the whole story is fabricated. So then, just the end of the story, he came and found Gabriel, the ministering angel of the Persians, holding the letter in his hand. Gabriel wanted to take the letter for him, but Gabriel swallowed it. Some say the letter was written, but it was not signed. Some say it was also signed, but when he swallowed it, the signature was erased. The Gemara comments, "This is why in the kingdom of Persia there are those who pay taxes, and there are those who do not pay taxes, and the decree was not finalized." It also states, "And when I depart from him, the prince of Greece comes." Gabriel screamed and screamed that the kings of Greece should not rule over the Jews, but no one listened to him. Again, no one listens to Gabriel. So also remember that Gabriel disobeying God in the Talmud is an extra offense because he's an angel, and angels don't have the same free will as humans according to the rabbi. So as Shabbat 88b to 89a mentions, angels don't have any evil inclinations. So Moses and the angels are arguing. Angels are saying, why are humans getting the Torah? Moses is giving them reasons why, and one of the things he mentions here is that Exodus 20:13 says, "You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal." Moses asked the angels, "Is there jealousy among you, or is there any evil inclination within you that would render these commandments relevant?" So angels don't have any of these sort of evil desires, which is why they're not tempted to sin. So when an angel sins, it's actually a big deal. In Islam, they don't sin, but in Judaism, they sort of do. In fact, Aish.com mentions that angels, they're spiritual, but they have no free will. Angels are defined as metaphysical beings. Then here it mentions they have no free will. So many rabbis actually say this, they have no free will, but then there are Midrashim and Talmud passages which like this, where they're punished and this and that makes it seem maybe they have some kind of free will. The point here is when they disobey and they do a sin, it's a much bigger deal than when a human does it. And we also know it was a big deal because he was punished by fire, 60 lashes of fire, and thrown out of the company of angels. Also, some people say, well, what about Satan? Isn't he a fallen angel? Yes, he is in Christianity, but not in Judaism. In Islam, he's actually not an angel at all, but in Judaism, he's actually just an angel. As you can read here, Satan is just another one of the many spiritual messengers that God sends to accomplish his purpose. And so he's just an angel like everyone else. The only difference is God said, your job is to tempt people. So as it says here, Satan's mission is to tempt people away from God and lead them astray. So he's just a righteous angel in Judaism whose mission it is to tempt people. So he's not evil. So he's not a fallen angel in Judaism. But anyway, the point here was they come up with this whole story, and you saw how they totally butchered the context of Ezekiel, the Psalm, and they also butchered Daniel 10. They butchered this context to come up with this convoluted story, which ultimately just makes the angel Gabriel look really bad. And it's, you know what it is? It's character assassination. It's assassinating the character of the angel Gabriel. And actually, the Jews in Medina sort of had a similar attitude. They said Michael, or Mikael, the angel Michael, is their friend, and Gabriel is their enemy, as it's mentioned here. Also, you notice here in the beginning of the narration, Michael is portrayed well, right? So here it mentions Michael is the ministering angel of the Jewish people, and he sort of is portrayed as obeying God. Then Gabriel disobeys God. So it seems here in the Talmud that same attitude is being reflected. And so whoever comes, fabricates stories and takes the Bible out of context to come up with these sorts of convoluted stories which make the angel Gabriel look bad and are negative towards the angel Gabriel as taking the angel as an enemy. And so Allah says, this is in response to the Jews in Medina, but applies here. قل من كان عدوا لجبريل فإنه نزله على قلبك بإذن الله مصدقا لما بين يديه وهدى وبشرى للمؤمنين. Say, whoever is an enemy to Gabriel, it is none but he who has brought it, meaning the Quran, down upon your heart, meaning upon the Prophet Muhammad's heart, by the permission of Allah, confirming that which was before it, and as a guidance and good tidings for the believers. من كان عدوا لله وملائكته ورسله وجبريل وميكال فإن الله عدو للكافرين. Whoever is an enemy to Allah and His angels and His messengers and Gabriel and Michael, then indeed Allah is an enemy to the disbelievers. So this is not a light thing, this is a big thing, okay? Because God, whoever is an enemy to God, His angels, His messengers, Gabriel and Michael, then indeed God is an enemy to the disbelievers. And you'll notice here Michael is mentioned as well, because Michael and Gabriel, they're together. You don't just pick and choose that, okay, Michael will portray well, Gabriel will portray poorly. No, they're together in terms of their purpose. Okay, you can't just pick and choose. This is a lot in Judaism, this sort of idea, for example, of, oh, Moses is such a great prophet, but other prophets we're going to slander, like Solomon, we're going to say he was an idol worshiper. Of course, some of the rabbis in the Talmud try and say that, but Tanakh is clear on that they label him as an idol worshiper. So we have this sort of concept in Judaism, oh, we'll pick these angels we like and we'll reject these other angels. Oh, these prophets we like, so we'll choose them. These other prophets, we're going to blaspheme them, etc., etc. No, it's not pick and choose. They're all together. And if you're an enemy to one of them, you're an enemy to all of them. Also, this ties into the last video where they were saying, they were, on the other hand, overpraising the angel Gabriel and saying he has the authority to rebuke God. That is also insulting the angel Gabriel, and it's also blasphemy to God. Both stories, whilst different, one overpraising Gabriel, one portraying him in a very negative light, both end up taking Gabriel as an enemy, right? Because by portraying Gabriel in these ways, you're taking him as an enemy. And whoever is an enemy to Allah and His angels and His messengers and Gabriel and Michael, then indeed Allah is an enemy to the disbelievers.